Code 3 Americans, hope everyone's doing well. Wanted to go over a news story this morning. Uh, Kind of supports what we sent out in our newsletters over the last couple weeks and some other videos on YouTube where we talked about the fatal funnel, how that's built into our financial system and kind of our overall economic system or model anymore. And then we talked about what the value of decentralized assets are. It's a two-part video series. Recommend you check that out. Um, but I think the story here today really illustrates or further illustrates the point we were making there. So there's a there's a news story here. This is on Fox Business, but it's in other locations. It just talks about Dems push plan to tax oil companies' profits, send checks to Americans during the Russia-Ukraine price spike. If you've noticed, the narrative has really shifted towards Russia and Ukraine, and from the White House, they're talking at the Putin price hikes. They're talking the Putin gas tax, and they're blaming everything on this Ukraine deal. The reality is the inflation numbers were out. We'll do a different video on that, but they were high. And the truth is, this stuff was happening before that. Yes, I'm sure the Ukrainian deal and the sanctions with Russia and oil exports and all that stuff you're seeing in the mainstream news, I'm sure that has certainly had an impact, put an accelerant on it. But I want to remind you, I don't remember if we put content out at the time about this, but when I was at the New Orleans Investment Conference for a week in October, there were a number of folks there that were talking about they were predicting $120 a barrel oil sometime in 2022, maybe even upwards as high as $140 a barrel. And that was before most people probably even knew where Ukraine was. So that wasn't a thing in the news, certainly not every day. And those were already concerns. Why? Because money goes where it's treated well. So when the tax credits and so forth all get pushed towards renewable energy or widgets or whatever the government decides, the capital starts to flow that way. And it's certainly being deterred from carbon-based energy. So when you look at pipelines being shut down and more bureaucratic tape to get drilling permits approved or whatever the case may be, that creates issues. And that's exactly what we've seen. But I really want to get into how this particular story talks about universal, or it really further illustrates we're moving towards a system of universal basic income. That's not conspiracy theory. That's not tinfoil hat stuff. Obviously, in the last 2 years, we've seen that. It came in the form of stimulus checks and prepaid gift cards and advanced child tax credits and the like. So let's take a look at this article here. And it talks about, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but it talks about a representative and a senator from the Democratic Party. They want to put a tax on every barrel of oil, and to look at the quote here, equal to 50% of the difference between the current price of a barrel of oil and the pre-pandemic average price per barrel between 2015 and 2019. Well, first of all, between 2015 and 2019, how much inflation has happened since then? That'd be an entirely separate video. It would be way too long. But I'm sure the oil producers have certainly experienced price increases in various things to get their product out of the ground and shipped and refined and so forth. So when you look at that, this would not be realistic anyway. And this is again punishment on big oil. Now, if we go down, I really want to come back to this part, but when we go down, you'll see that they're talking about only the biggest companies that extract over 300,000 barrels of oil a day worldwide. Well, the reality is most domestic oil that is produced by uh, small operators. It's not major players. So you kind of got to wonder, what is the strategy here? Are they just trying to push people towards doing what they want done, but trying it through another angle while trying to save face in a contentious election year? I don't know. But at the end of the day, this is the part I really want to talk about and how it ties to those other videos we put out in our newsletters and put up on YouTube here within the last week or two. So the money from the tax would be sent to consumers, voters, as a quarterly rebate. Sounds like a stimulus check, according to a description of the bill, with a cutoff for single people making $75,000 or more. So if you're single and you make 76,000, that doesn't include you. And families making 150,000 or more, also above that, would not include you. So what are we doing? We're drawing a line in the sand. We're dividing society once again. Same thing that happened in the stimulus checks. And I'm all about helping people. That's not the point. But I don't think we should enable and enslave people. And that's what this is. Politicians are creating dependency because the reality is the illness didn't create the oil problem. Human reaction to the illness created the oil problem, the energy problem, the inflation problem, the everything problem we're dealing with now. So whether or not they should have done it, I don't know. That's not the point of the video, but it is the point that central planners and politicians made decisions, and we are now dealing with the effects of those decisions. So you have to kind of look at this and say, what what is the play here? Well, first of all, follow the money, follow the power and control. Power and control will lead you to the money. It's been that way in every developed society in human history. But if they can create a system, which the system certainly is punitive towards wage earners. I mean, just look at the rate of wage growth versus the rate of inflation, and you'll see that people are getting destroyed. Okay, well, now this thing pops up and it's an election year, and they know it's a contentious election year. And the reality is, history says high inflation and really high fuel prices are going to be kryptonite to politicians, and they want nothing more than to be reelected. Why? Why do they want to be reelected? Well, it's power and control. If they're in power and control, they can be in a position to benefit themselves. So if you think about it, how else, I mean, just without even getting into the weeds, how else could a politician live in New York City or live in, say, San Francisco, two very expensive areas historically and currently, and also live in Washington, D.C. a large portion of the time? So they're maintaining a place of residence in two of the most expensive areas in the country, and they make whatever, couple 100,000, 250, 300,000 a year, whatever the number is. Regardless, that's not a ton of money. So how can they make that wage, live in two of the most expensive areas there are, and yet within a few years they become multimillionaires? What type of return on investment would they need? Huge. How could they get that? Oh, maybe perhaps having information before the rest of us so they could front load trades, or they could siphon money off campaigns, or they could benefit by pleasing lobbyists in some roundabout way through some cousin or whatever the case may be. I'm kind of being facetious there. But the reality is the simple math says if they're in power and control, they become enriched. So what do they want? To maintain the power and control. How do they do it? Well, they need the voters to vote for them. If the voters are upset at them, that's a problem. So what can they do? They can send out stimmy checks, and that's what we're seeing. They can send out these stimulus programs and say, well, hey, we're helping. But what it's really doing, the entire system is enslaving people, and then it's creating dependency. That's the fatal funnel we pointed out in the videos. You really should go watch those videos. And what am I drawing that from? Well, I've got a long background in uh, police tactics and SWAT experience and so forth. And if we want to control somebody, if we have somebody doing something, and say a barricaded person in a building and just come up with something, and we want them to come out, how do we do that? We take control of their environment from afar, and we create a constriction. We create something that's unpleasant, displeasing in their environment, and we encourage them to seek a more comfortable environment. Now, that's done in a number of ways, but they will typically comply. So that's the same thing we're doing that they're doing here. They've got this system created, whether or not they intentionally created it to control people, I don't know. But it is what it is. The system, the results of the system we have is what it is. So you have to look at that and say, okay, um, what 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 does that do? Well, it creates an opportunity for politicians to develop policy that helps people in a system that they're uncomfortable in. That makes them a little more comfortable. What are they most probable to do? Vote for them. And then these guys can become much, much richer. So this is universal basic income. We've already seen it. It's just they're further testing the waters now to this is important, to overlay this Look at what President Biden signed in the last week or two, whatever it was, relative to regulating cryptocurrencies and reviewing cryptocurrencies and really pushing to study and they're really pushing towards implementation, frankly, of a central bank digital currency. Now, cryptocurrency and central bank digital currency are not the same thing. In fact, they're polar opposite in what they're intended to do. So, if you understand what a central bank digital currency does, and maybe we'll do a video on that at some point, and where that's most probable to go, you have to understand a little bit about the banking system to fully get your head around that. So I don't want to go into that here. But if once you grasp that and you see news stories that we're seeing here, this starts to worry you. So this is the point of engineering out fatal funnels in your life where you're exposed to basically them satisfying your needs. And I got reality is the stock market. If you got a lot of money in the stock market or you got all of your money in the stock market, you are not diversified, you are not decentralized, you are diversified in one thing, the stock market. That's a fact. If you listen to Jim Rickards, just go look up who he is, and he will say the same thing. If you got everything in the stock market, you are not diversified like your financial planners are telling you. You're diversified in one thing, single point exposure, the stock market. And the reality is, the stock market is heavily dependent on subsidies and so forth from the government. Well, if people start to not do what the government wants done, maybe they'll squeeze that a little bit. I don't know if they will or not, but you're certainly exposed to that risk. So our point is look for those fatal funnels. That's how people have been controlled since the start of human history. Ask yourself, are you truly diversified? Are you truly decentralized to hedge yourself against that? and and get educated and really focus on these things and read these news stories for what they are. So anyway, this is the benefit of joining our community. We got meetups coming up, a number of things where we can get together, collaborate, share ideas. Just send an email to meetup at code3assets.com if you want to be a part of a future meetup, or if you just want to join the community and be a part of the discussion, be on the newsletters and have opportunity to get involved. Just send an email to community at code3assets.com. So anyway, we just want to go over this article here today. Um, we'll have some more coming up, but really be looking at where the game is moving, how it's shifting. You know, that nothing stays the same forever, and there are major movements. There are certainly clues. You know, there's canaries in the coal mine, if you will, and we got to be paying attention to what that is to try to get a good read on how the game is evolving and where the puck is going. As Wayne Gretzky's credited with saying, he was good at the game because he could skate to where he knew the puck was going while everyone else was going to where it currently was. So anyway, we'll check you out on the next video. Hope everyone's doing well. As we say in the SWAT world, once we get prepared in a known area, we're ready to take action and execute as a team element. Last thing you hear before it's time to breach the doors. Teams up, thumbs up, we go. See you on the